Hi, I want to talk about hidden personalities that many people and places have, and then these personalities or personas, they kind of fade away because of influences like, say for example, Iran has been occupied many times. It was occupied 2, 3 times by the Mongolians, and then there were Turkish invaders, Arab, and the Greeks, even the British and the Russians, and so this it was always a brief time, and then these guys they went away, and then Iran went back to its own culture, its own civilization. But every time this happened, it enriched the Iranians. The Iranian culture is very rich in many forms of art or spirituality, and also there has been vestiges of many religions, especially Christianity. I don't think we have much of Buddhism in there, but our race is very close to India or Indians, and many myths or stories in Persians are from Indian mythology. Anyhow, this is not where I'm trying to go. What the Sufi master was talking about, like he was reminiscing about the past. His father was the late Sufi master, that they used to go on and off to this place that was like a very small village, or even places where there were nobody, but there was just like some buildings or some build up, and they would go, the Sufi master would go and meditate there, and some of the students would follow him, and he was saying the place was very barren, it was like a hilltop. But I just was wondering who would want to go in such desolate places. Well, there are some people that they go into nature hikes or places where they're totally alone, and there is some reasons for this, that these people are fond of these kinds of experiences. Is because when someone lives in a village or in a town or even a big town, there's always a culture. Say if you live in New York, you know the East Coast culture, American culture, and their urban mythology, or their own ways of thinking about stuff. So these cultures, well, if you live in Tehran, also have its own atmosphere, its own way of being, living. These kind of overshadow the personal culture that really doesn't belong to that place. It's what this person would naturally evolve to be. It's like your own spiritual self, and this spiritual self would come out to the surface, and you would see this person if you didn't have all these other influences and all these other concerns and all these fears that were induced by some other culture. For example, when I was studying history of Greeks and Romans, and if you study the Greeks, and many Persians also have studied Greek culture and civilization, especially late Premier Mehdi Bazargan. He was the first prime minister after Khomeini came to power, and he had studied the Greek civilization and was comparing it to like Persians or Arab civilization. He was saying that the Greeks discovered many sciences. They codified or put together a lot of the early math, like geometry, number theory. But it goes on and on with medicine, astronomy, trigonometry. They had a very nice records of earlier civilizations, history. Or we read Herodot to find out what very ancient civilizations, Plutarch, and also, for example, they found a map that's traced back to the Greeks and before that might have belonged to very ancient civilizations, and the map showed Antarctica and other continents that nobody knew that such a outline even existed. It showed all this stuff accurately. Anyhow, their influence and their sciences, their medicine, their culture, their food, their is very rich, and many of the discoveries that you find all around us in math, in art, it traces back to the Greeks. Then Mr. Mehdi Bazargan was saying that when you compare the Greek culture, and then he started talking about, the Persian Empire and Persepolis, and how the buildings were made, and what the stuff was valuable. And he was saying that a lot of the stuff in the Persian civilizations were really valuable because they were made out of gold. Doesn't mean that they didn't have a lot of geometry, they didn't have a lot of sciences built into it. The value or the worth of this artifact was mostly based on the gold and silver or whatever that art that was significant for the period. So then one can compare, and many historians have compared the Greek civilization and its achievements to the Romans, and we see that Roman civilization was not very advanced in comparison to the Greeks. Well, I have done some similar comparisons with the Mayans and the very ancient civilizations that existed before the Mayans, and have discovered that, hey, many of these buildings were not made by Mayans. Same goes with the Greeks. Many of their building style or roads, the technology or the art that went into it were basically Greek, and they kind of stole it or transported it to this new civilization. Anyhow, what I'm trying to get at is that there are personas or personalities or spiritual selves that are kind of latent in people, and when you kind of brush the surface aside, the influence of the Mayans and the Romans and the Americans and the Mongolians, when you kind of dig into it and get rid of these guys, which really they were imposters, you discover that, hey, these older selves, these older cultures, they were much more advanced, much more rich than what you see on the surface. Well, this also carries on when, like the mystics or the Sufis in this case, they would practice solitude. They would go into remote areas. Well, I know that Prophet Muhammad used to go in a cave and meditate, but there are like many lost years with Jesus and other philosophers. Many of these people were like shepherds. They were like spend a lot of time alone, and this gives a chance to for your own self, for you to get in touch with your own self, and also for this older self, which is richer and more intelligent and also more connected to the universe, to come out. And one is often amazed, like, I never knew that this is really me. I think that as the civilization becomes more advanced, as it becomes less important to really be in a certain place or belong to the Roman Empire or the American Empire, when just the wire that comes in and brings high-speed internet replaces all these cultural icons that are in the physical world, then these other cultures or other selves, they emerge. Anyhow, I've had a lot of spiritual experiences that kind of point in these directions. Well, I was sleeping the other day, and this happens to me on and off, and lately more often. And the way this happens is like the light comes on in your brain. I think like you're sleeping and suddenly somebody turns on a very bright flashlight. For most people that happens in the outside, but for me it kind of happens like in my brain. When I was sleeping, I saw suddenly this very intense blue purplish light come on. It did wake me up, and usually there is like a trigger, like some doorknob turns, or this was this other trigger that happened the other day was like I had put some plastic, those Coke bottle in this refrigerator, and then the plastic kind of freezes over. It kind of pops a little bit. So what that did, and then when that happens, is like I see this image of myself, and really it's my doppelganger, my inner self. He looks a lot better than me, but this is similar to what happens with these people that go into nature meditation. Is their inner self gets a chance to manifest itself, and this is actually very healing, and because there is more legitimacy and more connection to this self than the self that's constructed by society or by indoctrination. Well, I would go over some of these ideas, and I've had some dreams and visions, and we'll talk about it at the later videos. I don't want to be accused of lunacy all in one session, I want to give myself and my audience chance to kind of get a more in-depth ideas of what's to come, to make up their own minds. Well, thank you very much for being in my YouTube channel. Please subscribe and leave your comments.